Why do music students quit around year 4? I've heard this trend in different guises and different ways from teachers all over the world. Depending on where I am and who I'm talking to, some teachers will talk about it as quitting at grade 3, others will talk about it as quitting at intermediate, mid-intermediate level, others will say students are quitting in year 4 or 5, or some might even say they quit just when it's getting good. Whatever way you think of it, there does seem to be this common quitting point at around year 4 or 5, or that kind of age of typical study. So it might be a slightly different year or a different time frame in your studio, but let's unpack it. Because if there's a common point where most students are dropping off, we need to understand why, so that we can help them to go further with music and reach their musical potential, whatever that means, or to enjoy music in the way that they want to enjoy it. So the first question is it age? Or is it actually level, as we've been thinking about? Because if in your studio, most students age 13 are 5 years into study and you're thinking about it as they quit in year 5, but they're actually all 13 years old, I'd say the 13 years old has more to do with that in many cases, because maybe they're changing school or their social world is changing. And that's actually what's causing them to drop out of lessons. So I would love to hear in the comments what you've seen in your studio. Is it a certain year? Is it when they move schools? Is it a certain stage or level of studies when maybe the going gets hard? Or they reach a certain level of proficiency and they're kind of good with that? I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments. So if it's not age that's causing it, and not like a school transition that's causing it, why is it happening? It could be for some students that they're just getting a bit bored of the routine. I find this sometimes happens with students who actually their parents are some of the most supportive in my studio, and I love that. And they will really stick with the practice habits and make their child practice, get their child to practice 5 days a week for years, okay? And then we're like 5 or 6 years in, and the student is maybe rebelling against that a bit. They're saying, I don't want to practice, or they're saying, I don't want to do piano. And actually it might be because they're a bit bored of the routine and of their parents being so involved in it. As I said, I love that their parents are so involved in it, but sometimes we need to phase that out. We need to give them back control of their practicing, even if it means they practice less for a while. Sometimes it's a curriculum or planning issue on our part, and we need to take responsibility for that and look at it without beating ourselves up, without being overly critical. We need to use it as an opportunity to improve our teaching. One common thing I've heard come up, especially for teachers who are saying grade 3, and they mean grade 3 of an exam system. What they're talking about is students reach this intermediate level, grade 3-ish of an exam system, and suddenly they find everything really hard and they quit. Now, why are they finding everything really hard at that stage? In a lot of cases, it's because they were doing accidental rote learning. I'm a big fan of rote pieces. I love rote teaching when it's intentional. When we're picking out highly patterned pieces that are easier to play than they are to read, and we're teaching those to beginners up to early intermediate students in order to let them play wonderful pieces of music and learn different things without having to read it, because that's just one way of learning music. However, when students are going through these exams or similar graded systems, sometimes their ears are helping them along in a way that disguises their reading. I think this is similar to in schools when they miss a dyslexic diagnosis for a child, and it's because they are a good memorizer. So they're not actually reading successfully, but they're very good at memorizing what the thing says and quickly correcting themselves and passing it off. And so they pass as being able to read much better than they actually can. Well, the same thing happens with music. Students are so good at imitating what we're doing, picking things up by ear, watching a video at home and learning it that way, that actually they're not able to read at that level, and we've jumped too far ahead for their reading. Sometimes it's not the reading. Sometimes it's the technique that's coming back to bite them. They got to this level with kind of subpar technique, either because we haven't taught it properly or because we've let them away with it, quote unquote, or something else is going on with their technique. Maybe they're even a transfer student, so we had no part in it. Now they've reached this level and they're not able to play their pieces anymore. They've just reached a ceiling of what you're able to do with tension, with poor technique, with poor posture. And that's what's causing them to get frustrated and to want to quit. So I think if we have students who are quitting at that intermediate level, we need to think about why it is, because then we can solve that problem. We can solve a technique issue. We can fix a reading issue. We can fix repertoire if that's not being expanded. But we need to know why it's happening in order to fix the root of the problem. Now, if you're interested in some different intermediate repertoire to open things up for your students and perhaps get through some of this intermediate dropout, you should watch this video next.